Guys, beautiful people of the internet, how are you guys doing today? Hopefully great. As you guys know, a lot of elements have been buffed. In this case, we are going to be focusing on cold damage. So I've already covered a very similar version of this build where you would be able to freeze the entire map and gain a ton of damage. So if you guys are interested in that particular mechanic, I highly recommend you guys go and take a look at that video. There'll be a link down in the description, and of course it will be suggested to you guys at the top right. So go ahead and take a look at it. But before I continue with the video any further, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys like to support me or the channel any further, do remember to leave a like on this video. It always helps me out substantially. Spartan, click the subscribe button for more Warframe videos and streams. We also do have a Discord server, so if you guys would like to go and associate yourselves with yours truly or participate in any other future giveaway that will be happening in the near future, go and join the Discord server, as this is the place to go and be, and of course knowledge is power. Without further ado, let's get this video on the road, shall we? So I already have covered all of Frost's abilities and all his kit and everything it has to offer, so I'm only going to be talking about the one particular ability that we are going to be prioritizing, that being Avalanche. So Avalanche is going to allow us to freeze the entire map, therefore providing us with our crowd control, our overguard, and of course our crit chance and crit damage if the enemies are frozen. This is all thanks to two augments called Biting Frost, which gives us our crit damage, and of course Icy Avalanche, which will allow us to gain overguard for every single enemy we then go and freeze. Now the build I'm about to show you guys has been modified so many times, so you guys can go and essentially mod to your heart's capability or your heart's content. However, it will be focusing on strictly Avalanche, as I was experimenting many times and figured out that this particular loadout works for my particular playstyle. So please feel free to mod to your heart's content. So for our build for Frost, if you guys take a look at the top right here, as you guys can tell, we have already added 4 Forma, which is a lot more than usual. And the reason why we've got 4 Forma is because I've already covered Frost in a previous video where we do take full advantage of both Biting Frost and of course Avalanche. And if you guys would like to know the exact details on the amount of power strength you need to go and equip just to make sure that Power Avalanche will be able to armor strip the enemies in one go, feel free to take a look at that video. There will be a link down in the description and it will be suggested to you guys at the top right. So I highly recommend you guys go and take a look at that video, as it'll break down all the details on how Avalanche works. Once you guys are done with that, come back to this particular video. With that being said, let's start off with the build itself. So if you guys take a look at the left here, you'll see that we have prioritized a variety of stats, duration, efficiency, range, and of course neutral power strength. Now we'll get back to that in just a second. It's actually a little bit different and all that good stuff. Alright, so for our aura, you actually have 2 choices. You can either go with growing power, or you guys can go with steel charge, entirely up to you. Remember, this is your build, your heart, your computer, build to your heart's content. So steel charge and growing power are an option, or you guys can just add any other white polarity that fits your particular playstyle. Next up is we are going to be adding cunning, drift, and stretch to increase our area of effect for our Avalanche. Now Avalanche is going to basically allow us to go and armor strip the enemies with the correct amount of power strength. I'll get to that just now. Next up is we are going to be using continuity and constitution, which will give us more ability duration. The more duration we have, the longer the enemies will stay frozen. The longer they stay frozen, the more crowd control and survivability you have, and of course it also gives you leeway to go and use our augment called Biting Frost. If you guys didn't know, Biting Frost gains more crit chance and more critical damage for your weapons if the enemies are frozen. If they're not frozen, then this effect will wear off. Next up is we are going to be using Precision Intensify and of course growing power if you guys decide to go this particular route. If no growing power, then just Precision Intensify. Now this is actually a very good mod because it gives you a lot of power strength with no disability or no weakness. The only downside to getting so much power strength is the fact that your 4th ability is the only ability that will reap the rewards. Everything else will be left untouched, which is not too bad because 90% power strength is a lot of power strength without any sacrifices whatsoever. So Precision Intensify is going to allow us to go and armor strip the enemies in one single instance. Therefore we can just push forward once and then armor strip the entire map even through walls, and you'll be able to just absolutely decimate the enemies. Next up is we are going to be using Streamline, which is going to give us the ability to use less energy for every ability we decide to cast, especially Avalanche. Avalanche is going to allow us to, instead of going from like 100 energy cost, it's going to go to 70, which is very, very good. It may not seem like a lot on paper, but when you're actually in the mission, it makes quite the difference. So make sure that you do have Streamline, because you don't want to get caught with your pants down. Next up is we are going to be using Adaptation and Icy Avalanche to allow us to survive. So Adaptation basically makes us sentient. So any form of damage that does get thrown at us will then be able to hit a 90% resistance on that particular damage type, regardless of the damage type that gets thrown at us. So always resist anything. And Icy Avalanche is going to give us Overguard for every enemy we decide to hit with our Avalanche. Hence why both Stretch and Cunning Drift are big factors when it comes to this particular build. Remember, the more range you have, the bigger your area of effect will be for your Avalanche. The more enemies you affect in a single instance, the more Overguard you'll get. And Overguard, think of it as a secondary shield that can just build up in large numbers, except when it gets fully depleted, then you'll be able to get a form of shield gating or invincibility frames, and you guys can just go and spam this. So Avalanche is actually benefiting you quite effectively, because look, it's going to provide you with crowd control, it's going to provide you with damage, it's also going to provide you with even more survivability. It's also going to allow you to just go and decimate all the enemies with the right pistols or the right weapons. So this particular build, we are going to be using pistols, so it makes sense why we're using both Arcane Pistolier and Arcane Velocity. Pistolier is to allow us to have infinite ammo if we go and kill an enemy on headshot. As the description reads, on pistol headshot kill, 60% chance for 102% ammo efficiency for 12 seconds with a Arcane Revive or free affinity revive. Next up is we are going to be using Arcane Velocity, which is going to increase our pistol rate of fire by 120% if we then just get a critical hit, which is guaranteed to happen. Most of the time when you guys go hit somebody, Arcane Velocity will always be active, because 90% is a big number, unless you get lucky where you only get like a 10%, or you're always getting like 10% every shot. I feel sorry for you guys who just get that unlucky, but it's highly unlikely for that to happen, especially if you do have a maxed out velocity. So our pistol of choice is the Piranha Prime, and as you guys can tell, I have already invested 6 Forma. This is probably the most amount of Forma I've ever invested when it comes to my channel, so please remember to leave a like on this video. Now, the Piranha Prime is a very special weapon. It has a unique trait where basically if you guys get like 3 rapid kills within 2 seconds, you'll be able to spawn a second Piranha Prime where your magazine capacity is doubled along with your fire rate. So essentially with velocity plus the unique trait, once it is activated, you're looking at around more than 200% rate of fire, which is absolutely insane. And we haven't even equipped any mods onto the actual Piranha Prime itself. Now when it comes to mods, here is what we're building for. So pretty much raw damage with critical chance, because remember, we're going to be able to go and strip the enemy's armor, therefore only leaving flesh. So it only makes sense to go and add the correct elemental mods. So they are as follows: Primed Target Cracker and Primed Pistol Gambit for more critical chance and critical damage, because remember, we're dealing with crits, and of course we want to see big boy numbers. Next up is we are going to be adding Lethal Torrent for more rate of fire and multi-shot. The same can be said with Galvanized Diffusion, except it's going to give us 100% multi-shot by default. Once we start killing the enemies, it's going to give us even more, which does stack up to 4 times. I don't want to do the math on that because I'm doing this video in real time. Half the video in real time, other video with a voiceover. Next up is we are going to be adding Hornet Strike, which will give us even more damage. And yes, I know my Hornet Strike is quite sad knowing that's only like level 5, level 6, but it's just the way I like to go and roll. Next up is we are going to be adding Galvanized Crosshairs for our critical chance. So basically when you guys get a headshot, you'll then gain 120% critical chance when aiming for 12 seconds, and if you start killing the enemies with a headshot, you'll then be getting even more critical chance, which does stack up to 5 times. So it's 40 times 5, and then which will give you a relatively big number. So it's just crits on top of crits on top of crits. So essentially make sure that you guys do have your raw damage. Next up is we are going to be using our elemental mods, our secondary elemental mods of choice, and because we're going to be dealing with flesh, we went with viral. So it's going to be toxin or pathogen round plus cold or deep freeze. Cold plus toxin equals viral. And of course our arcane of choice is going to be secondary shiver. Secondary shiver will give us 37.5% extra damage for every cold status proc. So once we do have the max version, it's going to give us 45% damage for every cold status. Now usually every time you go and freeze the enemies with your icy avalanche, it'll always armor strip the enemies with 10 stacks of cold. So 10 stacks of cold times 45 is going to be 450 extra damage for basically just stripping away the enemy's armor and leaving them with flesh. Because remember, you're going to be having all of this cold damage, and this particular arcane benefits from having cold damage entirely. Therefore, you'll be able to go and decimate hordes and hordes of enemies, assuming that you've just frozen the entire map. Freezing the entire map will provide you with a lot of utility, damage, and survivability. So we're currently in the simulacrum, and I quickly want to talk about the shards that we are going to be using. If you guys take a look at the right hand side of the screen, you'll see that we have a combination of both the amber shards and the azure shards. Both of these shards will allow us to improve our overall energy economy, whereas the amber shards will allow us to have more effectiveness on our energy orbs. So in other words, instead of allowing us to get 25 energy for every energy orb pickup, we'll then get 150% of that 25, which is going to be around 67 to 100 energy per energy pickup, which will allow us to replenish all of our energy in one singular go. And then when it comes to the azure shards, it's going to allow us to have a much bigger energy pool. In this case, it's going to be 100 energy in general. Overall, both these shards is going to allow us to improve our overall energy economy. With that being said, we are also going to be using generic, which is going to allow us to regenerate our energy even further. Therefore, we can just keep spamming all of our abilities. Generic is going to allow us to go and generate even more energy for every energy ore we go and pick up. And the same can be said with Wellspring, which will give us even more energy regeneration. On top of that, we'll also be gaining even more power strength, therefore making our build even more effective. Now the power strength isn't really necessary, we're just using generic just to increase our energy economy even further. So generic plus the azure and amber shards equals, basically we can just spam all of our abilities without worrying about anything whatsoever. With that being said, let me show you guys exactly how this particular loadout does work. So I've done a lot of experiments and I can't seem to decide what I want to do. So what I've done is I've simply just spawned in a ton of enemies, and what we're going to do is simply go up to enemies like so, hit them with your fourth, therefore they are armor stripped, go for their head and just start spamming them like so. Arcane Pistolier will then be procced, and then you'll just be able to just go and spam them. Now listen, you guys can just go for energized munitions, but I personally do not like it because your DPS just goes and drops significantly, because it's only going to be lasting for around 8 seconds. By the time you're able to go and freeze the enemy, you've already lost like 2 whole seconds, and then you'll have to go and spam it. I personally don't like it, but hey, it's really up to you guys. But I like to just use Arcane Pistolier. A max rank gun will give you 100% ammo efficiency, so don't really need it. And as you guys can tell, we just absolutely decimate and clear the room within seconds. So hit them with your fourth, hit them with that sweet headshot. You guys can see those beautiful crit numbers, and then you'll absolutely just own them. The only downside to this build is, can you handle the recoil? Because once you guys start decimating the enemies, you'll just go absolutely ham when it comes to the recoil itself. So I'm just going to show you guys one more time how it works, because this build, you just absolutely clear a room within like seconds. So hit them with your fourth, right? Gives you card control over shields and the crit chance buff. Hit them when they hit you, and then as you guys can tell, we are absolutely decimating them, and you can just keep spraying and spraying and spraying. The only downside is that Arcane Pistolier doesn't really allow you to, look at that recoil for starters. But Arcane Pistolier doesn't really allow you to refresh. You have to wait until the buff does disappear. And ladies and gentlemen, I make some pretty awesome Warframe content, so if you guys would like to go from 0 to hero as fast as humanly possible, Do remember to go and take a look at the rest of my videos. There will be some links down in the description, such as a playlist, and of course at the top right I'll be suggesting some videos to you guys, so go ahead and take a look at those videos. Do remember to leave a like on this video, it always helps me out substantially. Spartan, click the subscribe button for more Warframe videos and streams. I'm make like a banana and split. See you guys in the next Warframe video, stream, or YouTube shorts, depending on what my mood is in. I'm out. Peace.